officially then. My name is Bree. Hi. I'm the marketing and communications manager at TCG, and it's so great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, just because there are going to be folks watching who might not be super familiar with you and your work, I'd love to give you the opportunity just to like chat a little bit about yourself in general, how your journey has been. I know like you have an extensive background in acting, so I'd love to hear about what that transition was like from acting to becoming what I assume is mostly like a playwright now at this point in
Totally.
life.
I'm Alexis Scheer. My pronouns are she, her. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I was a child actor. I started acting when I was very, very young, doing stage and commercials and voiceover work, which is like a big industry in Miami. And I went to a big performing arts high school, New World School of the Arts. And I was a musical theater major there, but the ethos of that program was like, yeah, you're going to learn how to tap dance, but you're also going to know how to program a light board and write a play. And so really they emphasized, being a self-sufficient artist. And so it's kind of the only thing I knew. And all of my professors in high school were all multi-hyphenates. And so it wasn't really a question to me if I could do all of these things because I just saw everyone doing all the things all at once. Um, and I moved to Boston 15 years ago to get a BFA in musical theater from the Boston Conservatory. And kind of realized in that program, which was so specialized in performance, that I missed all these other parts of my artistry. And so I started a theater company, and I was producing, I was directing, I was writing. And then when I graduated undergrad, I kind of, took my company with me and made it a little bit more legit. And I was producing fringe theater in Boston and kept writing and ultimately went to grad school and got an MFA at BU. And yeah, and I think in that program, like realized, oh, I think this is where I resonate the most as an artist. Um, this is where I feel like I'm really contributing. I'm really like, connected to my greater purpose, which sounds so cheesy, but it's like very, very true. And yeah, and so I wrote some plays and took them out into the world, and the world kind of responded to it in a really like beautiful way. And yeah, and so now I get to make a living as a theater writer, but also as a TV and film writer. um, and it's just been a really awesome journey. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
That's amazing. Like that's really cool. I think not a lot of people have the opportunity to have this kind of combined scenario where they're really getting to try everything out in a way that is, meaningful. I think maybe people do a lot of different things when they're young, but it feels like, oh, this is sort of like a means to an end, especially people who think that they're going to end up performers at some point. So I went to Muhlenberg and they have a similar ethos, I would say, in terms of learning how to do it all a bit. And I think that's really valuable. And as a young adult, being able to see really like, oh, what really am I drawn to out of all of these different aspects of the performing arts? I'm curious, as somebody who has also gone to school specifically for playwriting and now is doing a lot of playwriting, do you feel like or how do you feel like your acting background has influenced the way that you write as a playwright?
Oh, completely influences. I think in the most like basic way, when I'm writing a scene, I'm thinking about the actor who's then going to have to pick this up, and the first thing they're going to want to know is, what does my character want, and what are the things I'm learning about my character through dialogue or stage directions. And so I really think of a play as sort of a roadmap for the other collaborators and a blueprint. And and having gone through acting training, I know all of the questions an actor is asking of the script and what an actor needs from the script. And so I make sure that's in there. Uh, and I think the same, like my producer hat is kind of always on when I'm writing. I can't help it.
Mhm.
So I'm writing things knowing like, oh, this special effect is a separate budget line, and
Oh yeah.
and sometimes that's helpful. And then sometimes I also need to like release that and just, write to my imagination. So yeah, and is the script legible to the other? Because a play is an invitation. That's why I love being a playwright. My job isn't uh, done without other people.
Yeah,
And so how can my work be an invitation to actors, a director, designers, producers? Yeah.
super cool. And speaking of plays you wrote, your play Laughs in Spanish is currently being produced at Speakeasy Stage. Tell us a little bit about that. What was your inspiration for the play? Excuse me. Feel free to give a brief synopsis for folks who might not have read or seen the play before as well.
Totally. Laughs in Spanish is, I think we're calling it cafecíto-induced comedy. It's set in Miami. It's about a woman who runs an art gallery. It's during Art Basel. And at the top of the play, all of the artwork in her gallery has been stolen. And so it's a little bit of like a crime thing. And at the same time, her movie star mother, who she has an estranged relationship with, comes into town. So it's kind of all this madness is descending around her, and yeah, and it's just a fun comedy about um, uh, mother and daughter relationships, art, and being an artist, but also being in the art world, and who is art for, who is art serving. Um, I think all the, questions that I'm certainly asking of myself, and I think a lot of us in the audience are asking as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, have you found yourself more involved in this production given that it's happening where you're based?
You know, actually not. So the trajectory of this play, this was actually started as my thesis play at BU 5 years ago now.
Okay, full circle.
And I wrote the play. We did a workshop production of it, and then COVID happened, and so this kind of like just floated around, and new play nether, waiting for a production, and waiting for an opportunity to really like you know do the play. And then I got the opportunity to have the world premiere at the Denver Center last season, and since then it was published and licensed, and so this production at Speakeasy is like one of like a dozen productions that are being produced now right around the country, and it just happens I live here, which is really awesome and fun. But the play is published and kind of it's here for an audit, or it's here for the theater to interpret and do as they please. And so I went to go see the opening night, which is awesome and out of body to be like, I wrote all this, and it's kind of just a delightful surprise. Different productions I think are like calibrated for the specific audience and the community it's in, which is really like delightful and surprising. And it's why I love theater, right? It's the
Yeah.
show I just saw the other night is not the same one I saw a year ago or 5 years ago. And yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And taking it out of Laughs in Spanish and onto some other works that you've done, another big project that you worked on was adapting Andrew Lloyd Webber's Bad Cinderella when it came to Broadway. How was returning to your musical theater roots?
The best. Honestly, if I could only work on one thing for the rest of my life, it's musicals. Musicals are my first love, and working specifically with Andrew, I think about why I do theater, and I can trace it back to I saw a beautiful big regional production of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat when I was in the second grade, and have a vivid memory of sitting there, and everything was so just amazing, and I was like, I have to be a part of this world, I have to do this. And then I got to tell Andrew that story
Oh my gosh.
as I was working with him on his show. so
Wow.
so really just wonderful, and to come back to musical theater, and be so, I think, entrenched in a musical upbringing, and especially the training. And again, I'm thinking like an actor when I write musicals, and I know, okay, well, I'm going to want this and this and this and this. And then to marry that with, you know, my writing craft and say, okay, I have all of the tools, I think, to write a musical. So yeah, it was great.
That's super cool. I got really into a podcast a while back about the making of Carrie, the musical. And the very, very fascinating thing I found was them trying to figure out how to marry kind of like the cultural understandings and the backgrounds of the people who were coming in from the US versus the people who were coming in from the UK. So anytime I see kind of like a cross-cultural collaboration happening, I'm like, wow, that's really, really cool because it takes a lot to be able to speak across what ultimately is kind of different languages.
It really is, and different cultures of theater, and especially musical theater. I think, you know, our American musical theater is responding to one, you know, type of the or one set of the canon, and
Yeah,
British musical theater is responding to, you know, Gilbert and Sullivan and Panto, and so it's just two different cultures of theater, and yeah, how do we bridge that gap?
exactly.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, you've worked on a big variety of stages from, you know, Broadway to regional. And recently, I know Breaking the Story went up on second stage, which I really loved. Um, I'm just curious, what do you find to be unique about each type of theater when it comes to mounting a production from maybe if you're a part of like the regional premiere of things or developmental stages versus doing something like bringing something new to Broadway or something off Broadway?
Oh, wow, what a big question. Um,
Good time.
you know, I mean, the big difference is honestly just money and resources and what is funneled into something. You know, working on a big Broadway musical, it's this big um, financial machine, and certainly the objective is to sell tickets. And whereas I think, you know, with the nonprofits, whether it's off Broadway or in the regional scene, there's a bigger opportunity to take risks. Um, and certainly I've felt that way. You know, some of my more risky work is is what can happen in a nonprofit. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Each theater is different and has a different culture,
Mm.
has, you know, a different subscriber base or audiences that they're already in conversation with. And certainly all these theaters are trying to expand who they're talking to and bringing in new audiences. Um, so I don't know. I've had it. The coolest part about being a playwright is, you know, you get to go all over and like kind of meet different theater communities. Um, yeah, I don't know if I have anything more eloquent to say about that, but
No, that's great. Thank you. And as a aside, I also couldn't help but notice kind of the parallels in reading about Laughs in Spanish and then seeing Breaking the Story and the mother-daughter relationship and that kind of like back and forth between the two of them. And I know Breaking the Story was inspired in part by research, but I'm curious as to whether that mother-daughter relationship also came out of the research, excuse me, or if that is like a through line that you find yourself just exploring more and more through your work.
yeah, I think more and more I'm realizing um, all of my work is kind of circling on ambitious women and what does our ambition cost us?
Mm.
Um, and you know, and it's funny, and I have these two plays that are wildly different about women who chose careers and there were consequences in terms of their kids. And
Mhm.
it's funny, that's like not everyone's like, oh, your mom. And I'm like, actually, my mom was not that. And I think a lot of it is me um uh figuring out what motherhood's going to look like on me, because that's something I hope to
Yeah.
do. I hope to raise a family and also have my career, and how do I do both things and be present in both of them, and especially knowing, you know, I have to have a career to support the family,
Mhm.
and so, you know, I I think that's all coming out in the work, and I keep writing these like wild mothers who have big deep desires, and I think love their daughters, and you know, hope their daughters understand.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
totally hear that. Yeah, somebody who's also, pursuing the arts and growing older, like those are things I think about all the time as well. So even, seeing that portrayed in such a complicated way was something that I really, really appreciated, because I think that a lot of times we get this narrative that for mothers especially, you're either kind of there or you're absent. And there's a huge narrative. I remember talking to my mom about this when I was younger. Like, I'm afraid because all the people who I see that are in happy, healthy relationships, their careers seem to be taking kind of a back burner space. And all the people who I see who are super, super successful, they seem to be like really isolated. And so I think it's really beautiful that we're now in this place where we're able to have more candid conversations about this, and that also like those very women and the people who are mothers or are hoping to be mothers are the ones who are like able to kind of take a lead in that conversation as well.
And it's really been great to me to also work with a ton of women on these plays who have experienced this in such a visceral way.
Mm.
I remember working on Laughs in Spanish, and the world premiere was directed by the wonderful Lisa Portes, and she's just like, I feel this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for that to resonate with so many people, a generation ahead of me is really meaningful to me. And yeah, because what a world we're in.
Yeah.
What a world we're in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to move us out of the realm of theater and into television and film. You also worked on Pretty Little Liars, Original Sin for HBO Max, which I binged in like a week. So my props to you. Great work. I loved it. How was the television experience for you as compared to theater? I know you talked about the difference in levels of funding for theater, and there's certainly that with television, but I also know, especially with television, as like compared to film, there's a completely different process for the timelines that are expected and things like that. So I'm just curious for you to tell us a little bit more about
Yeah, I mean, as a playwright, I had kind of the dreamiest first TV experience because another playwright called me, Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa, to be part of his writer's room, and he had seen Druglord and Second Stage, and I love that, a few years later when he was about to work on Pretty Little Liars, he remembered me and my play and was like,
that.
that girl should be in this room. And I remember that interview too. It didn't feel like an interview. He was just like, come hang out with us. It's going to be so fun. It's like a writer's room is like being at a dinner table, and and he was trying to like sell me on TV. Like, I believe you. It sounds so fun. So yeah, TV writing is, I'm learning the more I do TV and film writing. Um, it's no wonder that there are so many playwrights who are thriving in this field. And I feel like playwrights, um, we bring so much in terms of character and dialogue. Um,
Mhm.
and and so it's been fun for me to come into these spaces and kind of figure out what my strengths are and what sets me apart from other writers, and so that's been a really great experience for me. And um and TV and film certainly subsidizes my theater um at some years. Last year there was a strike, so it was actually a good year for me theater wise, and I was like, oh
Yeah.
wow, this really worked out in a great way. And yeah. Did that answer the question?
I think so. I mean, I think that's well, it's really cool to see more and more playwrights moving into the TV and film space. I think it makes a huge impact on, like you said, the way that we're able to then receive the content, like fleshed out stories that are just, there's a different way of thinking about character development that I think is really nice, because even if you do have less dialogue overall because it's a more visual medium, there's so much that kind of goes into the subtext that's really, really beautiful. And I think that also, like, the way that theater makers are thinking about things like representation and diversity, like there's also something beautiful that playwrights bring to the table in that aspect, in the way that they write. Like something I noticed was that there was this really great group of diverse women in this main friend group, but it was pretty devoid of stereotypes. There were people going through all different types of things, and they were obviously coming from different backgrounds. But when you have this really, really deep understanding of the human condition in a way that often playwrights have to have,
Mhm.
you don't have to rely on stereotypes in order to portray those different experiences. And I think that's really cool as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And this is a fun little question from me. What advice would you give to young playwrights, especially ones who might come from underrepresented communities, when it comes to getting their footing in the industry?
Um, Pay attention to your posture when you're writing. Start setting some good like posture habits because the older you get, some habits die hard. I write on my couch and my poor neck and my poor back. Um, that's very serious advice. My other advice is, gosh, what is my advice? Um, you can start anywhere. You can have a career anywhere you want. I think the difficult thing about playwriting is there's no defined path. There's no, well, if I do this and then I get this and then I get this, this is going to happen. And every single writer's career looks different. We're all going to work in different theaters. We're all going to have a collection of different, writing groups or recognitions, and so it's a big marathon, and you're the only one running in your race. There's no one running in your race that you have to beat, and so I think the most like beautiful thing for me is being in community with other writers and playwrights, because we are not, once we're in the room, we're the only playwright in the room. So, I'm part of a writers group, and we meet once a month, and it's our chance to share work with each other that's in progress, but also just kind of talk about things that are happening in the room, like, oh, this thing is happening and how do I navigate this, or I'm feeling this, and it's just a godsend. So, playwrights, find other playwrights to be in community with, also other directors. Just really like fortify your like support structure, because as the playwright, when you get in the room, you are the only playwright. There is no other generative artist, to be on your side, unless you're in musical theater, and then you got like composers and a lyricist, and it's a little less lonely. But yeah, I think that's really important. And I don't know, get hold of your finances. Stay on top of your taxes and your Schedule C and your write-offs, all of those things. Yeah,
Less glamorous, but very, very
less
important.
glamorous, but very important, and like not really a thing that they teach you in school.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, you're gonna get a whole ton of 1099s, and you have to remember to save some money to pay your tax bill or pay quarterly. So,
Right.
yeah.
And speaking of community, actually, this is something I'd be really curious to hear about. I think a lot of people, if they're pursuing the arts, regardless of what side of it they're going into, think that there are only a few places where they can kind of really succeed, whether that's New York or LA or Chicago. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what the experience was like going from grad school to actually working in Boston, which, is a theater town, but people consider it less of a place to live and make a living.
Sure. I think Boston is like so many other awesome cities where there is a scene, and it's not that you're gonna make your living only doing this one thing. For many people, that you are subsidized by teaching, or a day job,
Mhm.
and I think that doesn't diminish your artistry. That doesn't mean you're not an artist. If like I'm a playwright, but actually, that's not the thing that's largely paying my bills, but that's still the way I identify. And and for me, I liked Boston. I liked the community here. I have family here. It's where I want to raise a family, and so New York was never very appealing to me in any sort of like long-term sense. And so I was kind of stubborn about it, and I was like, I'm gonna stay here and see if I can like still work, and it's great. And then I go to New York if I have a show in New York, or I go to LA if I have to be in LA, and there's such a rich community here, and I think that's true in so many cities. And especially as a writer, it's kind of really great to be in a place and be responding to stimuli that is so different than other people. And I think it's like what helps me keep my plays feeling like me. And yeah, so I think it's a little bit more difficult when you're an actor, right? Because you have to be in a place. But I would love to kind of decentralize the theater, and yeah, and just really focus on like local theater, and creating this culture of like theater going in cities outside of New York.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a strong proponent of that. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. I think it's really important that people feel empowered to be able to live where they feel like they'll be able to sustainably live in a place that brings them joy, community, and not feel like they always have to be kind of like dragged to certain localizations in order to do what they want to do. So that's really great. Thank you. I really, really appreciate your time with us, Alexis. Thank you so much for chatting with me. Congrats on your success thus far, and I'm so excited to see what you continue to do.
Thanks so much.